Hello, welcome to a new episode of Geek Lunch Me. I'm your host Chris, as usual, and I have literally just come back from a private screening of Hellboy: The Crooked Man. And by private screening, I mean that me and my wife were the only two people in the entire cinema, which may sort of account for probably its box office take, but we'll look at that a bit later on. Yeah, if you're a Geek Lunch Me regular viewer, you'll probably know that I'm a big Hellboy fan, so I thought I'd give you my thoughts on the new movie. And if you like this video, don't forget, hit the thumbs up, helps out a great deal. And if you're not already subscribed, why not hit that subscribe button? It is free of charge, and will help us out a great deal as well. I should say as well that I have had a few drinks, so hopefully this review won't ramble on too much. But yeah, Hellboy: The Crooked Man has just hit cinemas here in the UK, and this is going to be one of those reviews that's sort of full of caveats. If you are a big fan of the Hellboy comics like I am, you will probably love this film. If you're not, if you're just a regular sort of moviegoer who doesn't really have any of the background, maybe you've seen some of the Guillermo del Toro movies or even the David Harbour movie, yeah, this film is probably not going to sit well with you. It is nothing like the three previous Hellboy movies, where it was sort of much more pitched as a comic book movie, as a sort of superhero. The first two movies were very much Guillermo del Toro movies. The David Harbour one, it took elements from the comics, but tried to put too much from the comics into the movies, and yeah, just tonally, it was it just didn't work at all. But with Hellboy: The Crooked Man, they've gone back absolutely to the source material. Mike Mignola, Hellboy's creator, co-wrote the script with Christopher Golden, who's also written a whole bunch of Hellboy comics and novels. And they've based it on the Hellboy limited series, The Crooked Man, which had gorgeous artwork by Richard Corben. And it's a very small Hellboy story set, I think it's 1959, up in the Appalachian Mountains. And it's very much a sort of folksy, sort of folk horror, witchcraft kind of story. And the film absolutely brings the comic to the screen pretty much as it is on the page. What it doesn't do is really give you any background. It just assumes you've seen the Hellboy movies. I didn't really pick up on it because obviously, as I'm a big, huge Hellboy fan, I've read all the comics, so I was just there with it. It was only afterwards that my wife said she could see why it wasn't getting a massive release, because if you hadn't, if you weren't familiar with the other Hellboy films or the comics, you wouldn't really know what was going on. I don't think the BPRD, the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defence, that Hellboy is a field agent of, I don't think they were even mentioned at all. There's at one point that Bobby Joe, the agent that's with Hellboy, she hands over a card to someone. I was expecting you'd get a big close up with like sort of the BPRD logo and sort of saying who they are. No, it didn't at all. So you're just left to pick up on a few facts. One of the sort of towns, well, not even a town, it's just a sort of small bunch of shacks up in the mountains. One of the women there says, "Oh, I know who you are. I've seen you on the cover of Time magazine." And then Tom Farrell, one of the main characters, says to Hellboy that I read, they found you in a church, which is the origin of Hellboy, with the Nazis and Rasputin trying to conjure up a demon to help them win the war. But instead they get this little boy demon who sort of the American army takes. So yeah, you don't get a lot of backstory, you're just thrown into it. There's a cold opening with involving a sort of giant spider on a train, which ends up with them sort of crashing and being in the Appalachian Mountains, whereas the story begins in earnest. And yeah, off the bat, I will say Jack Kesey, he nails Hellboy completely. As much as I'm a big Guillermo del Toro fan, I love Ron Perlman. I love the two Hellboy movies, the two original ones, but they are not the Hellboy from the comics. They are much more del Toro's creation than they are Mike Mignola's. Whereas this is much more the Hellboy that you get in the comics. He's much more laid back, quite laconic. The makeup is really good. I say that's the only thing I would say. The film is quite low budget, and it does tell in some of the digital effects. Some of the CGI is a bit ropey. It's not too bad. Some bits it's really good. Say other bits, it's sort of questionable. But Hellboy's makeup is good. I had no issues with the way he looks. I had no issue with the makeup on the titular crooked man when he turns up. So sort of, that side of it, they've got down well. I think they've gone with the Crooked Man story because it is, it's folk horror, it's witches, so there's not as much effects as if you had went for one of the other stories that had lots of sort of frog monsters and demons and things like that. Obviously, I say on the lower budget, they've gone with this. It looks great. It was filmed somewhere in Europe, I believe, Budapest or something like that, out in the forest, so it's all on location. It is very grey and desaturated. So it looks pretty good. Sometimes its lack of budget gives it away, but I was quite impressed with the cinematography. Sometimes it's aping that sort of Sam Raimi Evil Dead early, kilted camera angles and things like that. It did some stuff I wasn't too impressed with. There's a lot of things where a scene will fade to black, the screen sort of stays black for quite a while. It's quite jarring in places. I would say as well with the music and sound effects. Obviously, in this sort of film, I say because it's more of a folk horror, so you're going to get jump scares, and that's fine. That's what you expect. But there is quite a lot of just discordant violins suddenly going off at times when there's nothing really that warrants it being on the screen. I say, and some of the editing is a bit janky. It has got that low budget style to it, but it's directed by the guy that did he did the original Crank movie with Jason Statham, but we won't hold that against him. But he also did Happy, it's one of my favourite shows on Netflix based on the comic book. So he's a director, he's got some chops, and stylistically, it does do some interesting things. I think sometimes it does a bit too much, almost looking like a student film. Then maybe they sort of throw everything and at the wall and see what sticks. At times I think just stylistically they could have held back a bit. I think it's slightly over too long. It could have been shortened. They could have tightened up the pacing. There's quite a lot of stuff where there's exposition of just people sitting around talking. Again, probably to do with budget constraints. It's easier to have people sitting around talking rather than big action scenes. When the action goes off, again, the lack of budget sometimes shows. But what we get is pretty entertaining. There's a scene in a church with actually the priest, the blind priest is one of my favourite characters with his holy shovel. He's really good characterisation. It's really done well. As I say, it's not the big fights that you hope for that you used to probably in one of the Hellboy bigger budget movies. But it is in keeping with the actual story and the comic. So you've got to give them that. There's some nice bits where they actually talk about sort of Hellboy's origin and that his mother was human, was a witch, and there are some bits where they show her. Again, the only problem with the budget constraints there is there's a bit where they're sort of showing that she's sort of has been damned forever, for copulating with a demon and giving birth to this demonic offspring that may bring around the end of the world. And it's quite nicely done, but there's a little sequence where we sort of get, it's supposed to be the devil, I think, where it's just like a giant, like a crow. Obviously, say the lack of budget, it doesn't look like a giant bird. It's obviously a normal sized crow that's been blown up. That bit doesn't really work from a visual point of view. I like the idea they're going with, and and it comes up again towards the end as well. The Hellboy sort of feels a bit sort of guilty in that his mother is sort of burning in eternal torment. So regular viewers of the channel have probably heard me say before that I think that Hellboy would really work as a TV show, a BPRD show, a bit like the X-Files with you can monster of the week cases, but also bringing elements of the sort of the Ragnarok and the fact that the Hellboy is meant to bring about the end of the world. In the comics, you've got the whole epic end of the world storyline that it could build up to. And to be honest, watching this film, it feels a bit like a pilot for a TV show, a show that would give you a lot more of those background details when they get back to the BPRD, and you can actually see who it is they're working for and things like that. Fill in some of the gaps that the film doesn't necessarily show you. I think that would work really well, and I'd love to see Jack Kesy continue in the role. I think he does a really good job as Hellboy. And I'd love to see HBO's, or maybe not Netflix as much because they seem to cancel everything that they start with. But maybe one of the big streamers pick it up and run with it. As I say, with Jack Kesy in the lead role, I think could be really good going forward. But yes, on the other hand, I can also see if you're not a massive Hellboy fan like me, I can see why there have been some reviews of people saying, that they didn't like the film at all. And I think that's perfectly understandable. And going back to my point, I say me and my wife are the only people in the cinema on a Friday evening, and the latest screening, I think when I looked at it, had only sold 3 tickets. So you've got the problem that, to be honest, they dropped the trailer earlier in the year, sort of out of nowhere. It didn't have a release date on it. Then suddenly there were people in Malaysia, I think, and like Vietnam a couple of weeks ago. Suddenly said, "Oh, I've seen Hellboy. It's been released." So obviously got a limited cinema release, like over in parts of Asia. And then suddenly, I think there was like a post last week saying, "Oh, it's dropping in the UK on the 27th of September." So I thought, great, the cinema near me was actually showing it. A lot of the other cinemas don't appear to be. But they announced a couple of days ago it's now not going to American cinemas at all. So unfortunately, if you're a massive Hellboy fan, you won't get to see this on the big screen if you live in the States. But next week, it's basically dropping to digital platforms. You'll be able to buy it, rent it, and then there's a physical disc release coming out in I think it's the US and UK at the beginning of December. So you'll be able to buy it, and enjoy it in your home. Yeah, I don't know what the releasing strategy was, whether or not the studio suddenly realized, no, this is not a product that's going to appeal, to the mainstream, isn't going to make much money. I don't know how much it costs, studios to release these films at the cinema. They obviously decided no, they were going to have a smaller marketing campaign. It had a quite small budget, so maybe they're hoping it will make its money back, via this release method that they're doing. But yeah, so that's my sort of rambling thoughts on Hellboy, the Crooked Man. I had a really good time with it. But if you're a casual film goer who watched it and said, I didn't have a clue what was going on, it was all a bit jankily edited and all over the place, I wasn't a big fan, I can understand that point of view as well. But if you're a big fan of the comics, seek it out. But yeah, if you're a fan in the US, unfortunately, you're probably just going to have to watch it on your TV next week. If you have seen it, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Are you a big Hellboy fan? Did you think it was a faithful adaptation? Are you just a casual who didn't go much on it at all? I'd be interested to know what you think. As I say, let me know. So thanks for watching. Take care. Until next time, eat, geek, and be merry.